And tonight tonight or today, depending where you're coming from. For me, it's already tonight. I'm going to talk to you about journeys to learn languages, both physically and the process of learning a language. Well, whoops. Okay, so I come from Portugal and I teach in the tourism field, and I'm also a researcher, and my main research interest in the last 3 years has been language tourism. And what is language tourism? Language tourism is traveling to learn languages, people traveling with the purpose of learning languages. And of course, why did I choose this topic of research? Because I'm a language lover. Like I've been really passionate for languages for a very long time, and languages are my main hobby. So just to give you an overview of my presentation, I'm going to start by talking to you about my language journeys. And then I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my research on traveling to learn languages. And then I'm going to give you some advice for those of you who are language lovers, which I will assume is the majority. So maybe some of you will be, did anyone want to ask a question? No, okay. So I suppose some of you would be curious to know how many languages do you speak? That's a tough question because it depends on how you define what knowing how to speak a language, on what speaking a language is and how you define it. So, well, you can here maybe check this figure that I did at the beginning or at the end of last year to check my evolution in the last 5 years. So I'll probably be very confident to say that I speak 6 or 7 languages. I am less confident to say that I speak 11 languages, which are all the languages that I hear, but like I'm in the process and I'm enjoying it. So just choose the number. About my language journey, well, I was born as a zero-glot. I couldn't speak any language, and I was a monoglot for many years because I was born from Portuguese parents and I was living in Portugal. I didn't have much contact with foreigners. Here in the second picture, I was like probably about 6 or 7. It was a little bit after this that I started having the interest to learn a foreign language. I guess I was already interested like in languages in the sense that like I was curious, and I loved reading. I also liked writing and writing my stories. So I was already interested in languages by this time. And I started learning English like when I was 8, but it was only a few words that my mom was teaching me at the time. And for me, the passion for languages, for foreign languages really started, and it really hit me hard when I went to high school. That's when I started learning German. I was completely in love with German. I believe that my colleagues from high school still have this memory of me being in love with German. And this was something that really changed my life. Like the first picture here at the top, you see me with braces, and that's when I was in a school newspaper. I got a scholarship to go to Germany a month to study to improve my German, and it was a great opportunity because I was living with a German family, and I also made friends from all around the world. As you can see in the picture below, I met people from Mongolia and even countries that I'm not even sure that I can say them in English. Probably I can only say them in Portuguese and German. So I really met people from many countries, and this was a life-changing experience for me, even though it was not very easy, also because I was very immature at the time. Later on, of course, I studied German and English at the university in English and German literature, and I did my Erasmus. Erasmus is like an exchange that you have like in Europe, and you have the opportunity to study at other European universities. And I went to Cologne in Germany, and it was, of course, again, a great experience for me, and one that made me again more open towards other cultures and other people. Later on, I was definitely more mature, and I really enjoyed this experience. I lived 2 years in Sweden, My Swedish didn't get so good after these years because I guess I was not making a lot of effort, but I still learned some Swedish and I was doing their part of my PhD. And I guess that languages became something really important for my life in the last 5 years, because when you really stop studying and you become a real adult, life gets a little bit boring, you know. And I think that learning new languages can bring you it's something that is a passion, and it allows you, through languages you can do many things that are a lot of fun. So here in the first picture I was like in Venice, and I was finally earning decent money, and I paid a trip to myself and I went to Italy, and I enjoyed myself there a lot. So, and I was trying to meet people and trying to practice my Italian. And so this is when like learning languages became, although before I had already invested a lot in very seriously in language learning. In the last years, I've been learning more languages, more for the fun of it, because I have a career where I only have to speak English. I don't need the other languages that much. And so languages assumed a different role in my life. So here in the pictures in the middle, I started organizing language exchange meetups in Lisbon, like gathering people together to practice each other's languages. And for me, it was a very good thing because I had this possibility of making new friends. I was also living in Lisbon. This was not my hometown, so I also needed to make friends. It was great because I made friends from all around the world, and other people were also able to make friends through these exchange meetups. So it was a very, very good thing. And again, a little bit before the pandemic, I traveled to Taiwan to practice my very weak Mandarin, and it was also again a very good experience. And I'm sure that if I hadn't been learning languages, my experience would have been totally different. Well, it was also around this period that I started thinking, well, I am teaching at a university, so I have to do research. Why am I not doing research on traveling to learn languages? And I was thinking, is this a thing? Does this exist? Is this something that deserves to be studied? And at some point during this trip in Bologna, I stayed at a hostel, and in the same room, there were two other people that were also traveling, just like this, backpacking to improve their Italian. And I thought, well, this is definitely a thing. This is something that deserves to be investigated. And then I convinced the colleague to work with me, and then more people even to work together with me, and we've been studying that. So just without entering to a lot of details, we started by interviewing people, doing qualitative studies, and right now we are doing a quantitative study where we surveyed more than 2,000 people, about more than 1,000 travel to learn languages, the other didn't, but we still wanted to ask them questions about languages and traveling. But we interviewed more than 1,000 people who had traveled to learn languages. This is quite a big number. And what I'm going to talk about to you today is about the qualitative study, because it's already finished. The other one is still in progress. So we interviewed 22 people that were completely different from each other and have very different travel experiences. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about these experiences. So one of the things that I wanted to know is that if people are traveling to learn a language, what is different when in this kind of trips? What is different when you're traveling to learn a language from when you're traveling just for leisure and just for having a good time? Why is it different? What makes this kind of trip different? And my main conclusion was that it's different in two ways. One of them is because people are able to communicate in the host language in some way. Mostly, like the majority of people who I interviewed did not have a perfect grasp of the language. Many of them were far from being fluent, but even just speaking a little bit of the language, having some ability to communicate, it already made the experience a little bit different. And another thing is that by the people, the fact that they were trying to improve their language skills also made their experiences differently, because if you're trying to improve your language skills, you are going to do things a little bit differently. So you are going to actively seek contact with locals. You're going to try to be exposed to situations where you can speak to people, right? So this is one of the things that I noticed from the interviews. So people in general, they said that in this kind of trip, they felt that they had more contact with locals and that they felt a greater connection. Here, just citing what they said, one of them said, I had like a homestay family. I could practice my Korean with her and try to explain everything in Korean. So that was the best part. They also felt that they were treated differently. They were just like not treated as a tourist. They was treated like with more respect, or they were treated just like more nicely. And she says, people just warm up to you and are so much nicer and are more open. And many of the interviews also stayed with local families at homestays. It's very typical that if you're traveling to learn a language for some kind of program, that you stay with a local family. And this is also, of course, by definition, if you are lodging with a local family, of course, you're going to have more contact with locals, and of course, you're going to see more of the local culture. So, and one of the interviews also said, you're not treated as a tourist when you speak their language, not the same way. Also, many felt that the fact that they were traveling alone favored their integration with locals. So when you travel to learn languages, it's very, in our quantitative part of the study, more than half of the people who travel to learn languages travel alone. So travel alone tends to favor integration with locals. And one participant said, if your goal is to have an experience, get to know people, improve a language, if I'm alone, it's easier you have an obligation to practice, to interact with other people. And also others also said that they had to make an active search for contact with locals, because one of them says, you don't get to know German natives in a German course. If you don't look for contact with natives, you won't get it. So although in many cases they naturally were in situations that made them have more contact with locals, it was not always the case. In some cases, if they were sleeping in dorms with people from their own countries, or if they were not living with local families, some of them really felt that they had to make an active search for having a greater contact with locals. Others also talked about understanding the culture and having more authentic experiences, because they know the language. They felt that they could understand the culture a little bit better than if they don't speak the language and if they don't have this kind of experience. Well, first of all, because many of them were lodged with local people, and also because they ended up having less touristy and more local experiences. And quoting one of the interviewees, you get exposed to the culture, the food, the language so much more intensely. When you're in a hotel or resort, you're really like in kind of a bubble. And they also mentioned practical aspects, that the fact that they could learn, that they could speak the language, it made them feel safer, that there was a lower likelihood of being swindled, and that they felt more free. And here, quoting two people, we could eat at restaurants that didn't have pictures on the menu, or if you can speak a little Arabic, then they think that you're an expat, someone who lives there, and then they think, oh, well, she knows the normal prices, and then they stop trying to rip you off. And what happened to these people after their travel experiences? How do they reflect? Okay, they did this trip. What did they gain from it? They talked about their improvement in language abilities. This was really a main topic. Others also talked about how this influenced their professional academic goals, because some of them ended up having jobs that were where speaking this language was an important thing, either like becoming teachers or translators, for instance, but not only. They also talked about growing and transformation, especially the ones that traveled at a younger age and that stayed a really long time. They felt that they came out of this experience like a different person, which is also a little bit what I felt after that trip in Germany when I was 17. My experience resonates with this a lot. I think I would be a different person had I not had that experience. And I also said that they were feeling, for them, that they liked the feeling of freedom and independence, because usually when you're a teenager, you might not have many opportunities to travel alone, because probably your parents won't let you do that. But if you're traveling in a context where you're going to learn something, then your parents are more likely to approve of you traveling alone, right? So this was for my interviewees. For many of them, they have had this experience when they were still teenagers or they were still very young. This was the first time that they were like alone and then in a different country. And of course, it gave them a really this sense of being independent and being themselves and being free. They also wanted to do more language travel, so many of them did many trips to learn languages, either the same language or various languages. And some of them also wanted to return, either to visit friends or to further improve the language. And others ended up migrating to the country that they had initially traveled to learn the language. Because when you learn languages, these really increases the possibility that you become also more attached to the place and to the culture. So just some conclusions. It seemed to me like those who had the most prolonged stays, who stayed with local families, who traveled at a very young age, especially if they were traveling alone without family, and who thus have a more intense cultural contact with locals, these seem to have been the ones with the most transformational experiences. It seems that even those participants who only had basic language skills, this was already good to facilitate communication and to generate empathy among locals, but higher levels of fluency brought more benefits. Also, speaking in common languages brought more benefits. And here I was recalling just a participant who could speak a minority language from Nepal. And when he went there, the people from this region, from this area, they were so excited that they were offering him things and inviting him to their homes. So they were really surprised that he could speak this language. And a personality and the type of language travel also influenced the amount of contact with locals. Some people were more shy, had more troubles to have a lot of contact with locals, but some of them really made this effort to be open and to talk to people. And they were saying, hey, locals are everywhere. You just have to go to them and start talking. And finally, I'm not sure how I am in terms of time, but okay. My final tip for language lovers is that of course, traveling to learn a language is great, but it's not always possible because for many reasons, I don't know, health reasons, social obligations with family, pets, whatever, money, of course, this is a very important restriction for traveling. But I think that there are many things that you can do. And I would say that, of course, traveling was important to learn languages, but there are so many things that you can do outside of traveling. And of course, for many languages that I've learned, I haven't ever visited the countries, and I've still managed to more or less speak the language. So I'll say for me, important things is finding sources of comprehensible input. What is comprehensible input? It's input that you can understand. It might be video, listening, some kind of audio, some kind of book, something that you read. You have to have contact to something that is easy enough so that you can understand it, so that you don't struggle too much and get bored that easily. Try to read and listen to things that you can understand, even if not 100%. I like using graded readers, which are books that are made easier, especially for foreigners. I like YouTube channels. For my weaker languages, I use channels where people speak more slowly and that these channels are targets language learners. For example, I like it for Italian, I like Italiano automatico, Italiano automatico, like for French, I like Français authentique, inner French. So I like these channels, but like for languages, when I start getting more advanced, then I also like just channels like about culture or geopolitics, something that I'm interested in. I also love Netflix, because if you have Netflix and if you really like Netflix and you love languages, there's a Google Chrome extension called Language Reactor, and if you install it, you can have double subtitles, and you can also, if you want, stop the subtitles automatically so that you have time to read them. And this is a really, really great way to learn a language. Like right now, I'm just maintaining my Chinese by watching a series, and then the subtitles stop. I have time to learn them in Chinese. If I don't understand it in Chinese, then I can read below in English, just or maybe to double check that I understood, or when it gets too complicated, I don't lose the story because I just follow the English, and then maybe next subtitle is going to be easier. So this is something that I really recommend for those people who have Netflix and are learning languages. The second one is make friends in your target language. This is a really, really fun thing. This is probably the best thing of learning languages, is that meeting other people and then probably helping them learn your language while learning their language. This is, for me, it is quite a great joy of being adults. This possibility of meeting new people and practicing their languages. This is something that made my life so much better than before. I would say that my third tip would be not to neglect writing in your target language. And this tip is mainly if you are really serious about language learning. I think writing is a really great way to practice, because you have time. You're not pressured as when you're speaking. So you really can think about language, and you can really make an effort to use the things you're learning. And I think that it's also good to ask for corrections to avoid fossilization. Fossilization is when you repeat a mistake so many times that it already seems correct for you, and then it gets harder for you to start saying things correctly because you've already done this mistake so many times. So I think that getting corrections is a really good thing. So writing plus getting corrections, this is also one of the main things I do. The fourth thing is that I think grammar is important, but it's not enough. So I don't support the idea of not learning grammar at all. I think that it's possible to study a language without learning languages. I've done that, but I feel that studying a little bit of grammar may help you to speak the language more correctly. But grammar is important, but again, not enough. Just learning grammar, I don't think it's a very good approach. Might work for some people, it depends. I also think that it's better to do shorter but more regular study sessions. Yeah, I think this is one thing that I also realized recently. And also, of course, enjoy. Yeah, so especially if you're learning languages for fun, learning should be fun. If that's how you relate to languages, if it's from a hobby point of view, just really try to enjoy it and make it as enjoyable as possible. And okay, this is my presentation. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask anything. I'm going to stop sharing because otherwise I can only see my presentation. The research. Well, the first one, we just wanted to do, we only wanted to do more of an exploratory study because there were very, very few studies in the field, and they only targeted people who were learning languages at language schools abroad. So there were like no studies that just studied people who just decided to backpack and travel and to practice a little bit of the language while they were traveling, which is definitely a phenomenon that exists. As we've seen in the quantitative part of the study, there are actually many people who do that, who are learning a language in the country but not taking formal language courses. So we really just wanted to explore a variety of people. So we wanted to choose like a variety of people with different kinds of experiences. So we didn't have like a proper sampling process where we were choosing. So our goal really was to have quite a variety of people. So we were interviewing them. We carried out with some people very long interviews with people. Some people didn't have a lot of experience, so we had